Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Capitol Hill Day, Spring 2020. This is going to be a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about what we're hoping will occur in our virtual Capitol Hill Day. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Don Finn. I'm president of the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar. We have our friends from the Penn Hill Group who have just done a wonderful job in advising COABE in legislative matters and so on, who are going to take the primary lead on this webinar. But as we kick things off, it's my pleasure to now introduce you to Jody Angelone. Jody is our president-elect in COABE, and she is also our public policy chair. So Jody, I hand it over to you.
So good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We know there's a lot going on right now in our world and in our lives as we're trying to adjust to all the changes. So we really appreciate your time here and your efforts in trying to support adult education. And so, as you know, we represent a system of over 65,000 adult educators and 1.5 million learners, and we are here to advocate for them. And so we are going to use today's webinar to prep for our first ever virtual Capitol Hill Day. So thank you for joining us, and I am going to turn this over to Sharon to talk a little bit about our sponsor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jody. Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you. And as you probably are aware, our advocacy efforts are underwritten by Aztec Software. And Aztec Software has really just been a wonderful sponsor. We have a lot of great products that are free here that they wanted for me to mention. So there's new clients and there's existing clients. They just have excellent information. And they have been even changed their tagline to support adult education. So educate, empower, and elevate to kind of go along with our educate and elevate public awareness campaign. So I just want to mention, because they have been our sponsor now for 3 years, and they've really been the impetus behind the hundreds of millions of dollars of funding cuts that we've staved off and the 75 million that we've added. And through their sponsorship, we've been able to do that and working, of course, with you, our members. So special thank you to them. And before we go any further, I also would like to take just a moment here to say, please take a minute and introduce yourself in the chat box. Let us know your name and where you're from. We'd love to hear from you. Also, it's going to be really, really important to take action on that recent e-blast that we sent out asking for you to contact your legislator. Our friends at Penn Hill Group are going to explain why, but I just wanted to put that in here early because hopefully you've received that email, and if you have not, let us know in the chat box. We'll make sure that you get that email, and so you can take action today. We've already had over 2,400 connections with legislators. We know our members are responding, but we'd like all hands on deck. This is a really important time for the field. So without further ado, I also want to encourage you to get on social media and tag us. This is what we're going to be talking about here with social media for this epic Capitol Hill Day, this virtual Capitol Hill Day. We've never done it before, but it really does broaden the horizons of how many people can attend. Now, instead of it just being those who are there with us in person in Baltimore, now anybody can attend, anybody can make these appointments, which is really kind of the silver lining to all of this, is that you and all of your colleagues there in your office can participate in this Capitol Hill Day. So I just want to encourage you to spread the love, let people know about it, put it on social media, and we're going to hear a lot more from our friends at Penn Hill Group. I'm going to turn this over to them. And we have with us Michelle McLaughlin, as well as Audrey Pittman from Penn Hill Group. So ladies, it's yours.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As Sharon and Don and Jody said, these are really unprecedented times. A lot happening here in the Capitol as we speak. And we'll try to give you the most updated information on that, particularly about what may or may not impact adult education. But we are excited that we're able to change this Capitol Hill Day from an in-person event to a virtual event. And just to remind everyone, the virtual Capitol Hill Day is the same day as we originally were planning on doing it in person. So it's April 8th. And the idea is there will be no in-person meetings because really Congress is not, at this point, members of Congress and their staff are not meeting with outsiders very frequently, if at all. You've probably seen some members of Congress have even tested positive for COVID-19. So for everyone's safety, we're not doing any in-person meetings. We're doing phone calls or videos, video chats like this, like Zoom or whatever app or software you like to use. So what we've already sent out some communications on this, but for scheduled appointments, if you already had one set up as an in-person, you need to recontact your staffer and change it to either a call or video call, whichever they prefer. But for new appointments, you would just start off with that we are going to be going virtual. Next slide. So just to give you a sense of where things stand right now, so the first COVID relief package was passed and signed by the president, and that included the $8.3 billion in emergency funding for things like vaccine development, research and equipment stockpiles, and was really focused more on state and local health budgets. The second package that very recently passed was $1 billion in nutritional aid and expanded access to COVID-19 testing, and also expanded sick leave benefits, which I'm sure are important to many people in the communities that you work with. The third package is being negotiated as we speak. There's been a lot of back and forth. The majority leader in the Senate had just a Republican-only proposal. Then the Democrats met with the Democrats. They've done a lot of back and forth. They're a little stuck right now in terms of not agreeing on some of the basic components of the package. So on the House side, Speaker Pelosi has written her own bill, and our feeling is obviously these two bills will come together, and this is literally all going on as we speak. I believe as our call was about to start, Speaker Pelosi was going to be making some public remarks. So please keep checking your emails because we'll be updating folks along the way. Also, just as you might know, it's not the kind of thing that's just going to be solved by one package or two or three. So even after this is done, as Sharon said, we're trying to get $200 million for adult ed in there. This would be on top of the regular appropriation because we know our programs that people turn to them more when there's an economic crisis. There'll be an increase in enrollments. So the idea is to hopefully get something in this third package, but if we're not successful, we'll just keep trying to get into the next package. So after you get off this call or webinar, please, if you haven't already, take a look at the message that Sharon sent out earlier today, and please make those contacts as soon as possible. Next slide. So that's the COVID process, and so that's going separate from the regular appropriations process. So for the regular appropriations process, last year's bill passed in December, and it included $670.6 million for adult ed, which was a $15 million increase, which is terrific and obviously due to your advocacy efforts. In February, which is how the budget process usually kicks off here in Congress and DC, the president unveiled his budget for FY21, and he just included level funding or flat funding, which is the $670.6 million. Now, again, this is the president's proposal, but we still have this opportunity to try to make a case for increases. And compared to some other programs that were eliminated or cut significantly, Title II of WIOA, adult education actually did well. So now we are in the heat of the FY21 appropriations process with, of course, at the same time, all this action on the COVID bills. So appropriators were holding meetings, I would say, as recently as this week. It has really changed. As I mentioned earlier in the call, in-person meetings have really come to a standstill in Congress. So normal appropriations meetings are being done by phone as well. And we have our request that has gone into Congress, which we're going to talk about, into the appropriate staffers. But at this point, it's hard to know when these bills will actually get marked up. Usually the process could start as early as April, but probably more likely May into the summer. But with all the action on COVID and this ongoing crisis, it's really hard to say what the normal appropriation cycle will look like. But as a reminder, COABE is asking for a significant increase. We're asking for $692 million, an increase of $22 million. And so that's what the main purpose of the meetings that you'll be setting up by phone or virtually with your folks, your members of Congress, or their staff rather, that will be the ask that you'll be making. Next slide.
Thank you, Michelle, and hello, everyone. So now we are going to walk you through the actual logistics of setting up a virtual Hill Day meeting. So the first step will be to log on to Ignite, which is the tool that COABE provides to you all to streamline this process. And you'll need to fill in all of the required information there. So most importantly is that you enter your home street address, which will allow the system to pull the name of your member of Congress and the 2 senators that represent your home state. And once you do that, you'll be able to begin scheduling your meetings. So we want to make sure everyone starts scheduling these Hill meetings now, if you have not yet done so. And when reaching out to schedule these meetings, it is okay to reach out to staff during this time. But we do want to inform you that COVID-19 is really dominating staff time on Capitol Hill. So when you send your email, make sure to express gratitude to the staffer for Congress's hard work and all of their efforts to draft and pass the COVID-19 relief packages that Michelle just discussed. And reminder that these are really just verbal reminders to you. The Ignite text has pre-populated the whole email for you. So it includes a message about COVID-19 and a thank you to your staffers for this work. We also want you to be flexible when scheduling these virtual Hill meetings. So while it would be great if everyone could get their meetings scheduled on April 8th, it is okay to also schedule a meeting sometime around April 8th. If we could just go back a slide, we have a couple more things there. Thanks. So here it's really most important that we have the meeting rather than missing a meeting just because they can't do it on April 8th. We want to make sure we get those meetings in anytime around that week. We'll be fine. And we think really this is one of the benefits of a virtual Capitol Hill Day. As Sharon was saying, now more people can participate and really join us in making our voices heard. And then if you have already, yep.
Audrey, excuse me 1 second. I'm not sure if other people are seeing it. It seems like there's some sort of an issue with my laptop and with it not projecting correctly. Is anybody else experiencing that and seeing that?
No, Sharon, up to this point, we've seen it okay. It's been okay.
Okay, I'll go back to it. It just seemed like it was flashing. You see that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, yeah. So I think there's an issue with it on my end, and so we may need you, Michelle, or Audrey to share your screen, unfortunately. I'm going to stop sharing right now. And I'm going to apologize to everybody for this issue, this technical issue, but Audrey or Michelle, if you could pull up the slides and share your screen, that would be ideal. There's some sort of a technical issue on my side.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, Sharon, your screen was not flashing to us.
No.
It looked
Your
okay.
screen looked fine.
Oh, okay, great. Let me try that again then. So you don't see that? It's just on my end?
Yeah, it's just on your end.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
great.
So if
So are
we
we on
could
the
just
right
move
screen now?
forward a few slides. Nope, next slide, please.
Okay. Is this it or?
Nope. one more.
Yeah, this is gonna, I apologize, everybody. I know this is so important. There's some issue with my laptop here. Right? Is this the one you needed, or is it another one?
This is perfect.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Great. So on to step 3 here. So if you have already scheduled your Hill meeting before this COVID-19 outbreak, that is certainly okay. We want to ask you to reach out to the staffer and confirm this meeting. And when you're confirming the meeting, make sure to offer to meet by phone or video call and agree with the staffer on this preferred mode of communication. And here again, remember just to be flexible with scheduling needs and work around the staffer's needs. Next slide, please. So just to, one slide before that, please. Great. So just to take a step back a bit here, our major goal for the April 8th virtual Capitol Hill Day is to really go up there and make our case for increased adult education funding. So it is extremely important that we all come together and we make our voices heard on the Hill and we amplify the critical need for adult education funding. So as I just mentioned, we're targeting April 8th for all meetings, but again, we're going to be flexible and shoot for any time around that date. Also keep in mind that this virtual Hill Day is really an opportunity for more adult advocates to participate. So with no travel to DC required, we really call on each and every one of you to join us and make our needs known. So now I will turn it over to Michelle so she can walk us through some of the Twitter suggestions, which will allow us to make our voices heard in another way.
Hi, so me again. This slide is sample tweets that people can use. As we saw at the top of the call, we came up with a couple of hashtags that we thought people could use. And for those of you who are active on Twitter, you know, it's important to both, you know, use the @COABE HQ, so you signal who you are on Twitter and what you're talking about. And then the hashtags themselves are ways to get more people to look at the tweets. So these are just some examples that you can use throughout the day as you do meetings. So if you do a call and you finish up a call, you can say, for example, if you go down to the 4th bullet, enjoyed my meeting with whichever member of Congress was that you met with to talk about the needs of adult education. And you could say your state or your district, and then use, you know, @COABE HQ, which is the official Twitter account for COABE, and then we have a couple of hashtags to use. So for most folks, if you've never used Twitter before, you'd have to set up an account. I see a couple of questions about that, but for those of you who already have accounts, this just can be an easy way to increase like our presence and our voice on the Hill on that day. We can take more questions at the end about Twitter and tweeting.
Next slide. So hi, it's Donica Petrosius, part of the Penn Hill team. Sorry I joined a minute late. We have had webinars like this all day on COVID. So what I want to talk a little bit is about being prepared and a little bit of the tone and context about doing this kind of Hill Day in the midst of this COVID crisis and in the wake of this deal that's being done now that Michelle talked about earlier. So it's March 23rd now, and sometime in the next week, they're going to finish this deal number 3, and then you will be coming to them about a week after that. So I think keeping in mind that they may be wanting to politically and social distance themselves both after this very tenuous time, but they will all be in their own working virtually and still figuring out what that means to work virtually. So be very kind and sort of gentle in how you're setting these up, and just tonally, you know, make sure you're aware that this is a very difficult time for everybody. So the other thing that I want to, so when you're requesting the meetings and you're reaching out, we understand, you've been going through a lot and there's a lot, the current crisis. We hope we can still talk to you about some of our needs going forward. I will also say that if we are successful at this moment in getting that $200 million, then you want to definitely thank people, and we will send that out. If we are not, then we might also continue to ask for that, as there will be other packages going forward in the future. So one of the things we think about in these virtual meetings is you still have to treat it like an in-person meeting. You have to prepare. And oftentimes, just like a webinar like this, if you're not prepared and organized, it can go, if you don't know who's going next, if you don't know what the order is, how long, what are you trying to accomplish? Most staff members will have about a half hour for a phone call. And so you want to make sure that your team, if you're doing it with more than one people, or even just you yourself, are organized about what do I want to do for introductions and welcome? What do I want to do to, who's going to speak in what order? Make sure we get all the content we want to share in 15 minutes, and then leave 15 minutes for Q&A back and forth and discussion with the staff person. So that does take preparation of your team, and don't just wing it. Find a quiet place, just like we've all tried to do. I'm in my 9-year-old son's bedroom. It's the only place I can hide right now. Test out your technology and make sure that you are, all prepared across the board. And then this is just the summary. And also, I just want to say that, be prepared for whatever device or system is best for that staff person. They may prefer phone calls, they may prefer video calls, they may prefer they may prefer a certain Zoom or whatever people are using. I would let them kind of guide, and if they're not sure, then you can pick your favorite. But have that discussion with them as you're setting them up. So these are sort of general tips. I kind of talked about both at the same time, I apologize. But we want to make sure that if you also have an adult learner who is one of your, one of the people serviced by your program, please make sure that you help prepare them too. There's nothing worse than getting on a phone and not really knowing, if you're prepared, if your story is relevant, and if you're doing the right amount of time and things. So make sure to include them in your preparations for that meeting. But I do think, to the extent you can, and to the extent that you're even more able to do that because it's virtual, I encourage you to do it. Next slide. Another reason for having an adult learner on the phone too is it is inevitable that the staffer is going to be interested not only in our appropriations ask for FY21, not only in whatever context we're asking for our relief ask, but also just what's going on in your state and community and with learners on this particular topic at this time. So we drew up 5 kind of questions here that we think you might get from different staff members that you're talking to. You don't have to know all the answers to all of it. You don't have to have all the data, but be prepared to be able to talk about some of these things, whether through the adult learner or through the experience you're having as educators and program leaders, to talk about that, because this is still going to be top of mind for everybody for a very long time. Can you go to the next slide? So I'm turning it back to Michelle now.
Hello, this is Audrey.
Sorry. Okay.
No problem. So I can walk you guys through the national fact sheet that you'll have for these virtual Hill Day meetings, and you'll want to make sure that you're prepared to talk about these facts in addition to the COVID-19 related information that Danica just walked through. So first and foremost, we think it's important to walk through the basics. So feel free to check in with the staff and see if it would be helpful to them to give a quick rundown of what adult education looks like in your state or in your district. And make sure you take some time to explain what COABE is and what your role with COABE is. So you can mention that COABE represents the system of 65,000 adult educators and works with the 43 million US adults who possess low literacy skills. And here you can also share that COABE really works to advocate for more services, more funding, and less waiting for these adult students. And then you should describe your role in adult education and what you do on a day-to-day basis. This will help to paint the picture for the staff and allow them to ask any questions on the outset. So then we think it's really important to emphasize adult education's impact on its students and the surrounding communities. So here's a good time to include state and local specifics about your adult education program, or mention any data that you have about your program's successes or recent results. Here also, we want to remind you to walk through the national impact of adult education. So we think a really good statistic to highlight is that in 2017, 72% of all adults participating in a federally funded adult education program earned their high school diploma. So this is truly a great showcase to all of the hard work being done, and it points to successful results being achieved through our system. Secondly, we think another good talking point is that adult education programs are cost effective and they're smart investments. So share that we estimate that for every dollar invested in adult education, a community receives $60 back in increased income, property taxes, and savings on welfare and legal system expenses. This kind of return on investment statistic will be really compelling to some offices on the Hill. So we encourage you to share that. And then we think another way to kind of highlight our importance and our impact is to show where adults would be without our services. So you can share that without adult education, low-skilled adults are more likely to be unemployed, in poverty, in poor health, or incarcerated. So specifically, we have written on the fact sheet that low-skilled adults are 2 times more likely to be unemployed, 3 times more likely to be in poverty, 4 times more likely to be in poor health, and up to 8 times more likely to be incarcerated. So we really think that these statistics highlight how important our services are and how they can truly have a big impact on the students that participate. So then in your fact sheet, we've also included a section that lays out what the current adult education funding levels are. And here we really have these just so that all of the information is readily available to you should a staffer ask a related question. We want to make sure that you have all this information right at your fingertips so that you're informed and prepared. So as a reminder, in fiscal year 2020, adult education got $670.6 million in funding. And really here, I think it's most important that you thank the staffer for the $15 million increase over fiscal year 2019 and really express your appreciation for that increased funding levels. Next slide, please. So in these phone calls or video calls, the most important part is to make our funding ask. Staff really appreciate when you have a concrete ask that they can go back and really make a decision on. So our ask for fiscal year 2021 is $692 million for adult education funding. So as Michelle mentioned earlier, this is an increase of $22 million. And here you want to explain that this increased funding will really allow us to serve the students that are in need. And kind of on that point, here's also where you want to provide the justification and the need for this increased funding. So as you all know very well, our current funding is falling far short of meeting the need of our students. So here you can point out that at least 3 million people are on waiting lists for adult education services today, and increased funding will allow us to reduce these waiting lists. Here we also think it's important to tie the need back to the workforce, especially as we have an economic downturn coming after COVID-19. So here you can mention that 43 million adults currently lack the skills needed for many of the nation's fastest growing and often highest paying jobs. So without this increased funding, millions of Americans will be left behind, unable to get employed, while if we can get the increased funding and train more people, hopefully that will allow them to participate in the workforce and in the economy in a greater way. As Donica mentioned earlier, I think a lot of staff will want to focus on COVID-19. So here's another way you can mention that adult students are likely to be especially vulnerable in this kind of unprecedented situation. So remind staff of this and the real need for extra funding and supports. So I'll turn it over to Donica for some more big picture tips and other suggestions for these meetings.
Audrey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to talk, but my screen is glitched out for some reason. So I'm going to try to go to my PowerPoint to see what slide we're on. Sorry. Okay, here it's back. So these are just some quick tips. You are the expert, so they want to learn from you. So this is just something to remember. You know, I think a lot of times we go up and we meet these policymakers and we think that they are the experts. You are the experts. You're the ones who can tell them what the current situation with COVID is. You're the one who can tell them what the next, you know, what is actually the needs in adult literacy. So please come with that mindset and be ready to share. Next slide. Audrey touched on this too, but as much as possible, localize your story. So, you know, we have these broad issues. The fact sheet has a lot of issues, whether the story is from your program, your community, data from your state or your community, or the story from the adult learner or one that you have talked to and you want to share. Those all help make it very personal and important to the member that you're talking to. So a local story to your delegation is really important. Next slide. And then, well, you can go to the next slide. I touched on the adult learner already. So some of just the sort of, as you get through it, don't forget, even though we're not in person, we still sort of we have to do all the same things. So take notes, make sure ahead of time with who you're planning with, there's somebody identified, even if they do some talking, but identify to take good notes. If you get questions you can't answer, don't worry. That, you know, you can always say, you know what, I'm not really sure about that specifically, but I do want to, I will get back to you, and I promise that I will do that. And then make sure you write it down, that note taker, and make sure you do follow up. And that follow up is really important, whether there's a question or not. Make sure you send an email after it's done and say, here is the thank you for meeting. Here are the key things we talked about. Here's my contact info for future information. And if there is a question to follow up on, add it there. But make sure to say thank you and to do that. And I think I'm turning it back to Audrey.
Sure.
To talk about this Ignite slide.
Yep, I can walk through this last slide. So here, if you could just go back one slide, Sharon, please. Thank you. So we want to remind you all to use Ignite to schedule these meetings, and then put your times in the meeting scheduler so that everyone at COABE knows which meetings are scheduled and how much outreach we are all doing. And this way we can have a good sense of what offices are being contacted on the Hill and which ones we need to reach out to. Secondly, after the Capitol Hill Day, this is kind of a forward reminder. Please inform COABE of any meetings that you had and any important follow-ups or topics of conversation. This is really important to our overall success as we determine our strategy and our next steps. And you'll see here, I believe we'll send out the slides after this webinar. We included a link which has an online portal where you can record all of your meeting outcomes and any sort of feedback that you want to provide for the team at COABE. Next slide, please. So the next steps here would be to schedule your legislative appointments if you have not yet done so. And if you have done so, thank you. And please make sure that you confirm with the staffer on the Hill that this will be a video or a call meeting. Secondly, if you will have more than one COABE member or another teammate on the call or video with you, make sure you set a time now to make a plan and ensure that your meetings are ready to run efficiently with introductions, content, follow-up, a note taker, as Donica just mentioned, and decide kind of who will lead the call, who will make the ask, all of those logistics. So we thank you for doing those two things after this webinar while you have so many other things going on. And we will be happy to take any questions now if people have questions. Thanks.
So I do see a few questions in here in the Q&A. One gentleman asked, what is the $200 or 200 million intended for? Do we have a unified message? So she would like to have more information on that. And I can pull up the email too, if that would be helpful. So ladies, Audrey or Michelle, would one of you like to address that question?
Yeah, so probably the best thing is to consult the email that Sharon sent out earlier today. The messaging is really what we've been talking about this whole call, which is that, you know, our learners are among the most vulnerable workers, and so they're the ones that are going to be really impacted by the economic downturn. And also in talking to your leadership, they've made clear that in times of economic downturn that you do see a surge in enrollments. So wanting to be prepared for that as well. And then if there is going to be this shift to online instruction for an indefinite period of time, obviously you need some assistance with that, because one of the things we were discussing with Sharon and others last week is, you know, some of the apps that you normally would use or programs, you know, they have certain features that are only unlocked if you pay for premium, and right now people pay you know, may not pay at all, may pay just use the free version. And so to really be able to make our classes or your classes accessible to the point where people can complete modules, take tests, and really do the whole experience online, you probably have to upgrade. And so we've conveyed to folks in Congress that those are the kinds of things that we would use the funding for. So in the email that Sharon sent out is also the letter. So there's more detail on the letter itself.
Michelle, I just posted that to all the attendees so that they could see the email there.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
Is there more questions?
I'm looking to see. Are you able to see the questions as well?
I'm having trouble scrolling, so if you could just tell me if there's another question.
Okay, so the questions I'm seeing really now are more related to, will we be sharing the webinar after, which we will be. They're asking about having access to the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, she'll have access to that as well. And then the question about the fact sheet, which I can pull up a prototype of what the fact sheet will look like. I'll just need a minute. And then I believe others are posting questions into the chat box. So I really would need, if there's any questions, please put those into the Q&A. That will really help us in terms of consolidating.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were some, I did notice some things in the chat box about the statistics that we were using and citing in the webinar, and those all come from the fact sheets. So the national fact sheet includes the kinds of statistics that Audrey was particularly referring to, and so that's what you're about to, I mean, I assume they've seen that before, but you're going to make it available again for them to see.
Right, so we will have our national fact sheets, and then we're also going to have state fact sheets available for everybody. And I'm going to take a moment here. I want to turn this over to Dr. Don Finn and also to Jody Angelo, and I'm going to pull up those two documents so you can have them. And I'm also going to pull up the links for Ignite so you can see how to go in and actually make an appointment with your legislator. So Don and or Jody, if you could take it for just a minute, well, I'm going to be offline for just 1 minute pulling up those fact sheets for everybody.
Sure. So I do see, I know that the one question came about where the stats were coming from. And so the fact sheets that we're currently working on, Sharon's going to pull up as a prototype, as she said, we're working on that, but our stats are coming from the census, from Octave. Are there any others done?
Right. We're also getting some, yeah, basically information from the Census Bureau, from the different surveys of communities that are happening and so on. But those are really the primary resources for that information.
Right. We were hoping to have the new PX data, but that has been delayed, as you guys know, with everything else. And so it was going to be out in mid-April, and now it's going to be even later, it sounds. So that information we'll be waiting on, and we'll possibly see if that's something we would use in the fall. I think Sharon put the Ignite link in the chat, so hopefully you guys can see that. That was one of the questions.
Yeah, somebody wants to see the video. So also, yeah, with that, if you look in the chat box, the email that went out originally, it'll go to a MailChimp link that was sent to everybody. If you click on that, that'll take you directly to the Ignite link to send something out. We also have a Take Action link that's on the COABE website that you can use as well. So here we have the prototype of a fact sheet that is preloaded with information for the state of Connecticut. So Sharon, I'll go ahead and throw it back to you.
Great. So this really is what we're going to have for each of the states, and we're in the process of working with our firm who helped us with our Educate and Elevate award-winning campaign. But every state will have this information right here. So it's going to be preloaded. It's going to show the individuals that are in need, our enrollment numbers, the working age adults, the cost per adult learner. Like what we're trying to do is really cast the net to show, you know, in most cases, that's $10,000 per pupil for elementary and secondary ed, but we're getting $495 per adult learner from the feds, with those who have the most barriers and are the hardest to reach. That's really going to be our messaging, and we're just about finalized here in terms of the look and feel of this, but every state will have this. It's going to be on our Educate and Elevate website. And then as well, and this is something we're going to be sharing out with you shortly, as well, we will have our national joint data sheets as well. So hopefully that makes sense. So every state will have this information, and then I'm also pulling up the national information as well. And we also have a link that enables you to go in and connect directly with your legislator, asking them for an appointment. So Don, did you have anything else while I pull up this other fact sheet as well?
Sharon, there's one question that I would like you to answer. They said they reached out to their senators and congressmen and only heard back from one. And they wanted to know if they should resend that again in the Ignite.
Yes.
Do you recommend they do that, or that they also reach out to the legislative aides?
So that would be my opinion, is they should reach out again. But what do you think, Danica and Michelle and Audrey?
Yeah, I think they should reach out again, and definitely reach out to the staffer. I mean, I think make sure that you're able to not just send it to the senator or congressman scheduler, but also to the education staffer who is most likely to take that call.
Okay, so here's this data sheet as well. This is our national data sheet. And here we talk about, you know, the things we've been talking about for so long, you know, our challenges of who we're dealing with at the national level, and that there's 43 million working age adults that lack the skills that they need, and 7 million job openings. At this point, there's probably a lot more actually now, but this was as of just a couple months ago. And what our results are and what we do over here on the side. And then as we go down, just talking about funding and that sort of thing, which will be really helpful for the legislators when you meet with them. So this is a part of a packet of information we'll be sending out to you very shortly. And I would just encourage you to familiarize yourself with this, and then reach out to us if you have any questions at all.
So Sharon, one of the questions was about if the stats include adults in correctional education.
It does, yes. On our state sheet, yes, it does.
You know, one of the things that we want to emphasize is that this shift to the virtual format is a shift for us. And, you know, we had every intention and still have every intention of meeting the deadline to have the fact sheets together and ready for distribution ahead of the meetings and so on. So we do ask that you be patient with us as we finalize those. We still are waiting on some statistics and information as well as formatting them, because we do have 51 or so to do, as well as having the national one. So we are going to have everything, up to speed for you and have it to you in time so you can review that and also send that along. I think you're also going to find that you need to be patient, with your leaders' offices, as again they are very pulled in many different directions at this point in time. But I can't emphasize or overemphasize, for that matter, the importance of advocating for adult education. And we so appreciate your interest in this and your persistence in doing that. As was shared on this webinar, it's if you have the ability to have an adult learner with you, that would be awesome. But definitely have some stories about adult learners that you have worked with as well. So I have found in my multiple visits to the Hill, in those face-to-face visits, to have a personal story from a teacher's perspective to be very valuable and to carry a great deal of weight. So it's these types of things that get us on the radar. And these types of Capitol Hill days, again, they've all been in person, so this first virtual one is going to be really interesting. But we have seen results in funding cuts that have been staved off, in additional funding that has come along as well. So we really do appreciate your interest in this and your involvement. It's not going to happen without you. Sharon, pass it back to you.
Great, thank you. So this is a link we're going to put into the chat box, but you will come here, and as you can see, mine is already pre-populated because I've taken action already. But then this is where it's already preloaded for you. Now you can change it and update it as you see fit. But this is all the people it's going to over here. These are my representatives. I'm also trying to get a meeting with President Trump and Vice President Pence. And then once I hit submit, it goes, and I've always gotten responses back. So I really encourage you, when we send this to you, you're able to customize it. This is what the message looks like. You can change your subject, you can change your message. It's just a really wonderful way to reach out to your legislator and get those appointments scheduled. Any questions? Once you get the appointment scheduled, then we're going to send you a link that includes, where you can let us know that you have this appointment scheduled. And then from there, after you have your meeting, there's going to be a link where you can give us feedback and let us know, how did it go? What was the take back from that meeting? So we have this link to get the meeting scheduled, another link once you have it scheduled, and then a link to let us know how it went. Does that make sense? I see lots of Q&A. So I'm not seeing any new questions in the Q&A. Does anybody else see any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
There's a new one, Sharon. A data that is focused on performances instruction has, of course, been interrupted. Burlington has been helpful for some providers to maintain virtual instruction numbers.
I'm sorry?
So they're saying numbers are still going to be compromised. Should we be emphasizing that performance will be affected this year?
Michelle or Danica, do you want to address that?
Could you explain a little bit more what they mean about the question? I mean, I think definitely we should explain numbers are impacted, but I'm not sure what the concern is.
Yeah, I think it's that, and honestly, we just had a state webinar today on this. So instruction is interrupted, and so right now, a lot of the adult education programs across the country are working to move their classes to a virtual classroom or online, and some of those are going to be, easier than others, and some are going to take a lot more time. They're talking about Burlington English is one of the publishers that's been helpful in helping them to maintain or to help put up virtual instruction. But regardless, our numbers will probably be compromised or impacted, and so they're worried about, if we should emphasize that with our legislators. So again, I think if you talk about numbers and you talk about fact sheets and data and outcomes, we recognize that right now we're using prior data, but they're looking at, we're going to have data coming in the incoming years, probably this year and probably into next year, that's going to be impacted by this COVID-19.
I think that's okay, to be honest about all of this. I mean, does anyone that understands the dynamic situations going on as Hill staffers? I think you say, these are the numbers that we know today. We also know that the immediate next few months of this COVID response is going to make this volatile. And yet we know from past history that when there's economic downturn, our numbers go up. And so we are anticipating both having to structurally and be prepared for more. And so I think that's okay. You're explaining these are numbers that are changing over time from different aspects. So I think that's okay, but just you can explain it like that and people understand that.
And I think to her point, Donica, what she's also referring to is that right now we have a legislator on the phone or on Zoom and explaining to them how badly we need that 200 million because it's really hard to get your program up and running into an online platform. So I think that was part of the question too. What we're using, of course, probably everybody on this, I hope everybody here on this webinar knows, the best data we could get from Octave is 1 year old, right? They have to scrub it and review it. So that's what our fact sheets are going to have. They're going to have the most up-to-date information we could get, but it's going to be a year old. So that all being said, what we're also talking to legislators about is the fact that we know our numbers are going to be down with this COVID issue, right? We're going to have a hard time gathering the numbers because of the federal requirements. So I think that's a talking point we're going to want to make. We're going to want to help these folks make, Donica. We're going to want to help them make that point that we need that additional funding for the 200 million so that we can be set up properly for this online learning.
Yeah, I think that's a great issue to raise.
So I just wanted to chime in, folks. So I have the Q&A going, but there's a lot happening in the chat area that probably should be in the Q&A. So I just wanted to kind of shout out a couple of these things. Of course, somebody is asking, I understand the feds have stopped testing in K-12. Will Octave do the same for WIOA? I don't know that we can answer that question authoritatively, but I think that would be a great question to ask Octave directly. Again, this situation, lots of things are happening and they're happening very quickly. So I think some of these questions are really ahead of the curve right now.
Don, could I chime in on that one?
Yeah, please.
So I was on a virtual town hall with Octave last week, and they are going to be releasing guidance very quickly. If it's not this week, it will be next. But I mean, they were even hoping to have it available last week. So I know they're on this, they're discussing this, what types of requirements they're going to release programs from. So I just want to encourage all of our attendees that this is something that is definitely under consideration right now. And I think we just need to continue to make that case that it's going to be really hard to meet requirements so that, just so they're aware.
Yeah, and I think again, I think there is an awareness of that. There was a question also here that if the meeting with the state rep is virtual, should we record and share? I'm not sure. Maybe Danica, Audrey, or Michelle can chime in on that. My sense would be maybe not. But what do you all think about recording and sharing the meetings, the virtual meetings with representatives?
Uncharted waters, right? First time ever.
Did you say recording? Was that the question?
Yeah, it says if the meeting with the state rep is virtual, should we record it and share?
Oh.
Yeah.
Certainly ask their permission before you would do that. Some leaders might be comfortable with it, others might not. So there's nothing wrong with it if you want to use that later as like something to motivate other people in your community. But I think you just have to be clear and ask permission ahead of time. Yeah,
exactly. That's what I was going to say as well. I mean, gosh, at least, ask permission for that. As there are probably a lot of, there are many things that, many laws perhaps that could be violated with that. So if you ask permission, if they're willing to do so, at the same time, though, don't be surprised if they don't allow it just because they might not.
And there's probably
Well, I was just going to say, I would say that generally, it's probably not in our interest to record it. And the reason is staff are going to be much more open and candid with you if it's not recorded. If anything's recorded, then especially in this time of social media, and they're going to just listen and you're not going to have a discussion most of the time, because most of these staff can't even go on record. Only press secretaries can go on record publicly. And so by recording it, it puts it in a different light. So I would just give that caveat that you should definitely ask permission, but I feel like you'll have a better conversation if you don't.
Yeah, agreed. So you can see that that Sharon is in the process of putting up the links in the chat area, because a lot of folks are using it. So we got the links there to set up an appointment. Also, she's sharing the link for you to log your appointment as well. So at least at this point, you know, you can see what they look like, particularly for logging your appointment, because we're asking for that after the fact. And that information will all go out again, you know, to help support you. You should be receiving a bunch of information prior to our virtual day, you know, with the links to for reporting out, for the fact sheets, et cetera. Sharon, anything else to share on what kind of pre-meeting information they'll have?
Right. So again, the most important thing is we will send out after this call all of this information in one succinct email, but the link to set up your appointment, right? That's the email that will help you reach all those folks. The link to log your appointment, so we know how many appointments have been set up. We have their national data sheet there, and we're going to have on our Educate and Elevate site the state fact sheets. So you're going to want to go ahead of time and look at your state on educateandelevate.org, and I'll show you that as well. And that's where you're going to download it. Now, please know that, as Don said, this is in process. Like, we're in the process of putting this up. We just got the information from Octave the other day. So we've been working really, really hard on this. But before we go live on the 8th, you'll have your information. So I just want to show everybody real quickly where they would find this. You're going to go to educateandelevate.org. You're going to come over here and click on where it says the map locator tool. That's it. You're going to click right here. And then you can either find your state this way, or you can come down here and find your state this way. Either way. So I'm going to go to New York State right here and pull that up, because that's my state. Now you're going to see right now, these are old fact sheets. Like I said, we're in the process of updating these. We will have up-to-date fact sheets that have that information that we just showed you for your state. That will all be here. So we will send all this information out again in advance so that you have it, but that's where you're going to find your state fact information, state fact sheets. A lot of people, when they have these meetings, they have data that their state association has compiled. Like, for example, I know that Patrick Brown with the Michigan State Association is on, and they do a wonderful job of putting together information that would be helpful too. So I would encourage you, use what we have, but I also would really encourage you, take the time to reach out to your state association as well, because they often do a very good job helping to make the case as well at the state level. We partner very closely with state associations for that reason, or that's one of the reasons. So all that to say, we've got the link to go in to help you set up your appointment, the link to go in and let us know the appointment once you've made it, the national data sheet, the state data sheet that's going up. And then lastly, there's going to be a link for when it's all said and done and you've had your meetings, to let us know how the meetings went. And that'll all be delivered to you in one succinct email. So that's it on my end. Anybody have any questions before we go? All right. I just want to thank everybody for making time for this. And we really look forward to seeing you on the 8th. Thank you, everyone.